Hey guys, Youngblood with you to continue our journey through the Starmap. This one being a bit strange visibly, almost having that same distortion we see on the screen, specifically in like Vanduul systems, but this one is for a much different reason, and we're talking about the Oratani system. Now, this story starts in the 25th century surrounding a mining scan operator by the name of Micah Zahir. Now, working aboard his mining ship, the Asura. Now, work was pretty slim at the time, in the Pharaon system, mostly due to the controversies that were surrounding the distribution of mining rights. Now, after making some much-needed updates to his ship, he was basically broke and had to go up taking on some alternative roles in different types of jobs, like running escort for supply runs. Now, on one run in particular, the ship he was serving on got information that there were some raiding parties on the supply line, so he ended up altering the ship's course. Now, working the radar station, he ended up identifying a kind of an odd signal. He wasn't able to determine what it was. He was able to tell it wasn't another ship, but before finishing up his scans, it basically vanished, or they kind of fell out of range, or something happened. Now, the supply run would end up successful, but he was just too curious about what he had actually found. So he returned later alone and started on an investigation to see what he saw out there before. Now, what he found out to be previously undiscovered was a jump point, which is pretty interesting. Now, he took several trips through this jump point to get it fully scanned, and upon claiming the discovery, decided to name it after his favorite starship from a movie hit from about 15 years earlier, the Oratani. Zahir would end up taking the profits from the discovery of the new system to buy land on Selene and Vega, where he would end up spending the rest of his life, eventually becoming one of the largest landowners in the system. Now, Oratani would lead to a lot of excitement because we were still in the rapid expansion phase of human history, and new systems were far from old news at this point. Oratani had 6 planets. 2 of them immediately were cleared for terraforming by the Pathfinders that went there, and that meant opportunity, especially with one of those being in the green band and potentially habitable on its own. Oh, and to help with the terraforming and creating jobs and a stable economy here, there was also a mineral-rich asteroid belt that was present here too. The UNE would eventually pick up Terraria terraforming as, there was a ton of people that wanted to terraform, right? It's still new. There was a lot of technology that was coming out, so they had a bunch to pick from. They ended up going with Terraria to take on the job of making Oratani 2 inhabitable, which seemed reasonable, but it was a little bit odd because they have never actually terraformed a whole planet before. The company did do a good job, though, of hiring people with a ton of knowledge and experience by luring them with large paychecks, so they would end up having more capability than a startup would typically have. But they ended up having something interesting in the fine print, which was that the people that worked on this would actually need to live on the planet that they build after the completion was done. And the idea was that the results would be better if they knew they were creating their own future home. It's a pretty interesting idea and one that kind of makes sense. Now, that idea drew a ton of qualified candidates that were eager to make their name on a system of their own, and terraforming started in 2483, just 2 years after Zahir announced the discovery. Now, all seemed to be going really well, and the head of Terraria would become, pretty prevalent for bragging, and, everything kind of seemed a little bit preachy. She would come in and say that we were a year ahead of schedule, and people are happy, and everything was great. There was also an aggressive media campaign going on that was being led by Terraria, swaying public opinion. However, there were also some reports that were coming out saying there were things like food rationing taking place on the stations that were leading to black markets. And some of the employees hadn't actually been informed that Oratani 2 is actually an ocean world, which meant that even though they were terraforming it, they would actually have their new home consisting of them living on a platform in the middle of a huge ocean, which isn't necessarily ideal, right? So with these rumors starting to become a little bit more prevalent, Terraria invited journalists to come along and see for themselves, hopefully to go back and report the things that they would see. Only 2 days after they entered the system, the jump point from Oratani and Pharaon collapsed, leaving everybody stranded from the rest of the UNE inside the Oratani system. Now, this was a huge catastrophe because to this point, people had just kind of assumed this romanticized version of exploration and expansion was reality. We go out into this and we easily change and conquer it to, really make space our liking. But It was a harsh reminder, and it kind of shook the collective spirit of those who ended up seeing this happen, and people didn't even understand how it was possible. The previous thoughts were that the jump points were unstable, but they never just vanished until this happened. So tons of ships just flooded out to the last known location of the jump point. They tried to reopen it. Scientists and companies all got involved. Donations were spilling in, all in an effort to do something. But can you reopen a jump point that's collapsed completely? They just didn't know, and unfortunately they wouldn't find an answer. Months passed, no progress was made, and it just eventually sank in that we probably aren't ever going to know what happened to that jump point, to the system, and to the people. Now, we have relays and scanners and ships that are regularly on rotation for any signs that are coming out of the system or for potential new jumps that are opening up, but nothing's pinged anyone to this point in time. So eventually, there's just kind of this fear now from explorers that are going out into the wild. And systems that were already discovered began to hoard supplies just in case this happened to them. Systems that had multiple jump points saw massive booms in population because that redundancy provided security and comfort. And those that only had one jump point coming in started to have people just flocking away. Now, people even started returning back to Earth, home, which is in direct opposition with the vision that was established, and unfortunate for Earth, which has already got overpopulation issues going on at this time. Now, there were even some hoaxes of signals, of course, people being people, messages coming from Oretani, but all of those have really been confirmed to be false, though there's still some people that believe that there are voices coming from Oratani today. The short version of all of this is that those people were stranded, and we basically have no idea what is happening in that system, if there's anything going on there at all. I kind of look at it and say you have thousands of people there, you had starships there, you had terraforming equipment there, they probably had a good way to make this work. The question there is really probably more about food and rationing and that kind of category. So there's a strong possibility here that there's going to be an opportunity for a player to find a jump point leading to Oratani in the verse at some point. So if you're an explorer, finding systems in the Pharaon area, could be an interesting search. Though potentially kind of maddening at the same time, because we don't really know if anybody is going to find this. I think they probably will. But, if you kind of get an idea of where Oratani could be, you could probably start looking in those types of systems to see if you can find your way in. Now, as far as planets in the system, we saw a mesoplanet that was in close orbit to the star. Oratani 2 was the non-oxygenated ocean world where terraforming began. Oratani 3 was an ice world that had a promise as a terraforming candidate. Fourth planet was a gas dwarf that had not been examined very thoroughly. Oratani 5 was a gas giant filled with hydrogen and helium. And 6 was way out in orbit, was a dwarf planet. Now, I'll obviously be skipping the jump points to other systems and the who would want to come here segment of this type of video because, well, it's pretty obvious. So that's the Oratani system. If you guys have questions on any of this, please let me know. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for a lot more coming soon, and have a wonderful day. Take care.